Wow naman, napasarap talaga yung usapan natin. Pero unfortunately, limited lang ang oras natin with our dear guest. Kaya ayun, sadly, kailangan na nilang magbabush. Pero, oh my gosh, ayan. Pero ayan, wag naman kayong malumbay mga inday kasi meron pa tayong isa pang handa para sa inyo. Ladies and gentlemen, in honor of our non-binary brethren, make way for our special segment starring our guest, a non-binary trans individual from House of Iris' very own floor, Mix Victor!
Hi.
Hello, Mix Victor. Ayan, ayan,
Hi,
ayan.
Courts.
Woo! Hello, hello, hello. So, for our first question, how would non-binary representation translate in Filipino media, considering that we already have non-binary figures in our pre-colonial culture, such as Bathala, who was said to be gender neutral?
It would be actually really easy for non-binary representation to translate into Filipino media because I mean, non-binary people can also be Filipino. It's not mutually exclusive. All we have to do is derive the experiences of non-binary, like living Filipino non-binary people of today, and turn their stories into like works of fiction that can be turned into pieces of media. So, for example, there is like I'm not familiar with many non-binary icons, but the only one that I know of that is Filipino is Vice Ganda, and it's
Yes, wow,
though
yeah.
Vice Ganda does appropriate some negative stereotypes regarding like queer people. It's still a good start to it's still a good start because it exposes people to the idea of non-binary people, and uh and in turn slowly I think our future will be able to create media with non-binary characters that accurately depict our real life experiences.
True, and hopefully in those stories we could also have non-binary actors be casted in order for
Yes.
it to be a more realistic portrayal.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and in the Philippines there's really very little non-binary representation. Like you
That is
said, the
very
only
true. Yeah.
the only the only non-binary person you know of in the media who has spoken out about being non-binary is Vice Ganda, and it's
Mhm.
good that they talked about pronouns and such on national television. So it's really a step, don't you think?
Yeah, it is definitely a big step to making Filipino like society more welcoming towards non-binary people and like everything that comes attached with them.
Yeah, totally. But as you said, like there is really very little representation of non-binaries in Filipino media. But do you think the Philippines can learn from existing media that is there?
Yes, definitely, because there are a lot of pieces of media like from Western countries that
Yes.
do have non-binary characters, which is very progressive and like really helps younger non-binary people learn more about themselves, and actually not just non-binary people, even cis people, or just cis people can also learn from non-binary experiences.
True. And let's discuss about one of those existing media. So, okay, so let's say, for example, sex education. Sex education in their latest season, season 4, had featured a non-binary character named Cal. What do you think of that?
Hal is a very good start, I'd say. It's they're not Their character is not perfect because in my opinion, at least from what I watched, a lot of their character is all about their gender identity. And
Them being
yeah,
non-binary.
and it the series doesn't give Cal the time they need to develop their own character beyond their gender. Like we don't know anything about Cal's family or the Cal's friends. Like how did Cal's family react to their gender identity? Are they accepting?
True.
We know little to nothing about Cal, though that does give me hope for this fourth season of Sex Education, because it gives them more room to grow for Cal's character to develop.
True. I hope that a lot of Cal's interactions with the characters would carry over to season 4. So yeah, I
Yeah,
think season 3
definitely.
was a very good season in showing new characters. And there was this scene in Sex Education season 3 when Cal was teaching their non-binary friend, their fellow non-binary friend Layla, on how to bind. What do you think about that?
Yes, that was a very, very accurate depiction of how people think binding works, and in stark contrast, what binding actually should be like. Because for context, binding is when somebody who was born with female genitalia or assigned female at birth uh, wants to flatten their chest so that they experience more gender euphoria rather than dysphoria. And in Sex Education, they showcase one non-binary character binding in a way that's actually harmful to their health and could actually
Yeah.
cause really serious health problems, such as like breaking a rib, for example. And it was very good for Sex Education to bring light to this topic, because it's one that actually affects a lot of non-binary people. Like
Yeah.
I when I was thankfully, when I was still like in my baby non-binary phase, uh I was exposed to positive or like healthy ways of binding rather than having to like wrap my chest in bandages, because wrapping your chest in bandages, the bandages will slowly tighten and it can cause severe harm to your chest area.
Yeah.
And uh what Sex Education did was show a character binding properly with like a binder that was designed to compress chests in a safe manner. And I think,
True.
yeah, that scene was really powerful, and it was probably my favorite, or like second favorite scene in the entire show.
Yeah, it's really nice. Imagine how many non-binary people have been binding the same way Layla did, right?
Mm-hmm.
So maybe it was in sex education that that many of them saw how to bind correctly. So I think
Mm-hmm.
that was really good. And props also to sex education for hiring non-binary actors to play
Yes.
non-binary roles. So yes, it's that is very important, I think. But let's discuss
Yeah.
about other media. What do you think? Do you know any other um media that includes non-binary representation? Because for me, the first time I ever encountered the word non-binary, the idea non-binary, or the fact that a whole group of people like that exist was in Steven Universe, in the introduction of one of a character from Steven Universe Future named Shep. And I think what was nice about Shep was that they just happened to be non-binary, you know. So yeah, and I think that's really
Yeah.
cool.
I think Steven Universe was definitely one of the most influential pieces of media that included like a wide variety
Of
of
queer
LGBTQ
characters,
plus
yes.
characters. It is a really good show for being able to do that. And since it's a show aimed for young people, it's also really good because um young people be able to like better form their identities, and like they'll have a head start essentially in getting to know their gender identity, their sexuality. And yeah, so non-binary characters like the one you stated are very important for like the development of younger kids and even older people too.
True, because there's some people who figure out their sexuality like later in life, you know.
Mm-hmm.
There's some there yeah. So yeah, because they never got that education when they were young, and they were only exposed to that when they were older. So yeah, there are situations like that. So yeah, how about you? What other non-binary characters in the media have you encountered, of course, other than the ones that I have mentioned?
The first time well, okay, there are not a lot of non-binary characters in media to begin with, but
Yes.
I believe the first time uh, I encountered rather a gender non-conforming character was the character of Chihiro Fujisaki from a series called Danganronpa. When I was really young, I felt this weird connection to this character because they were assigned male at birth, and yet they wore skirts, they wore feminine clothes, and it made me feel like it felt like when I saw them, it like my brain just expanded essentially because I didn't realize
Whoa.
at the time, yeah, I didn't realize at the time that men could also wear women's clothes, and that really the lines between a man and a woman can blur in a beautiful, beautiful way. And and ever since that moment, I've always had this connection toward men who presented in a feminine way. And eventually that led to me realizing that I myself am partly a man, or am just not on the cannot be described by the male or female binary. I am beyond the binary. And characters
Mm.
that weren't even meant to be non-binary, like Chihiro, can actually really, really greatly impact your like a kid's or anybody's perception of themselves. But I feel like because the problem with this character is that they were never explicitly stated to be uh gender
No.
non-conforming,
Mm.
or like
It's
to
all.
have.
It's mostly in the subtext, right?
Yeah, exactly. I had to like reach deep into the subtext to be able to say, hey, this character is non-binary. If this character was presented to me just as non-binary, I feel like my journey to exploring and figuring out my gender identity would have been a lot smoother, and like I wouldn't have experienced all of the fear and confusion I felt when I was still figuring out my gender. Like there's so much um there's just a lot of fear when it comes to figuring out your identity because of the lack of representation in media of people
True.
who you identify with. And yeah, I was scared about like my friends and family thinking I was just trying to be trendy. I was afraid of
It's
my
a
friends and
phase or
family.
whatever, you know.
Yeah, exactly. I was scared that I would have to um sacrifice my connections with my family members just so that I can be the person I am, you know? And it's just very scary. And having queer characters in media can be a great comfort to those who are still in the closet. And yeah,
True.
so I think instead of making just uh whenever you're making a piece of media, you have to be mindful of the people who are going to watch or consume the piece of media you're creating, so that you can make sure that everyone feels seen and represented and, loved.
Right. You gotta understand the homework, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and your what you shared, your experience with that, with the character, is really a testament to how powerful media is, and
Mm-hmm.
how much it can open up how it can open up a whole new world for those people who don't even know that that's possible. Like for example, me, I never thought that non-binary people existed until I saw Steven Universe, and that was refreshing, honestly. It really
Yeah,
did. Yeah, it really opened up a whole new thing that maybe no, maybe there aren't any lines, maybe it's a spectrum, it's a spectrum and not a
exactly.
line, right? So yeah, so okay, with that, how would you like to be portrayed in the media if given a chance to direct a film featuring NB protagonists?
Well, like I said before, I would probably base my writing or whatever piece of media I use on the experiences of real non-binary people. So it would be really easy for me to just interview non-binary people about their experiences and get to know like how they came to be and how they overcame all of the problems and like turmoil that comes with being a non-binary person at this
Mhm.
age. Like it's I just have to make sure that I don't resort to stereotypes or like I
True.
have to make sure the character who is non-binary feels like real. They don't need to be an exact replica of a non-binary person, but they need to feel like they would a real person. They need to feel believable. And
Yes, honestly.
believability is really the core of how to make a good character. If you think that this character could exist in real life realistically with I mean, yeah, if they could uh exist in real life and like you could see them like interacting with the world that we are in, then I think that would be a great character. And we need more non-binary characters who feel that way.
True, true. And not just in audiovisual media because we've because most of the stuff that we've talked about is in media that is audiovisual stuff that you can
Mhm.
see. But what about the stuff that you can only hear? What about music?
Yeah.
I have not encountered any like okay, I've encountered some songs, but you have to really
Yeah.
dig through the bin in order to really find songs like that, or even find songs that if you liking a non-binary person, how can you how does that how can you make a song that does that you know
Yeah. Uh you really at the heart of it, it's just easier to do it yourself if you can't find
True,
the
true.
media that you want, that you
You make
wish
the
you saw when you were younger, then you should make it yourself. Because everyone has the capacity to tell a great story. We just need to realize that anybody can create a great story as long as we, you know, just write whatever we wanted to hear when we were
mm.
younger.
Okay, wow. That those are such powerful words for our listeners. So, another question. What do you think about cis people writing about non-binary people?
I think
I
that's
mean
just people, yes.
I mean like provided that they have they consult with their non-binary friends, for example, about the piece of media that they're going to create. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's great that cis people want to write about non-binary experiences. However, it's also equally as important to make sure that non-binary content creators can also have the chance to tell their own story, because being able to see a non-binary content creator is really empowering as well, because it makes you think, if they can do it, then so can I. I don't need to be cis to be able to create powerful pieces of media.
True. Wow. Yeah. I'm sure a lot of our listeners will keep that in mind. So,
Mm.
yeah, thank you very much for your wise words. You shared so many good insights, and I think a lot of our listeners will take that to heart. So, yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you too for having me.
At dyan nagtatapos ang ating episode 1. Stay tuned for the next episode of LGBT with Iris VC.